Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Beyond the Forecast. I am not a meteorologist. I am MaryCatherine Price, and I'm here to bring in a very special guest today to talk about this upcoming forecast that's looking to be a bit of a doozy. We have former Chief Meteorologist John Bernier here. John, welcome.
Oh, hello, MaryCatherine. So nice to see you, and congratulations on your recent wedding. Couple things to talk about here. Big changes in what you're seeing coming out in the forecast models. And remember, when Matt and I were talking Monday night, we said these storms usually have a tendency to creep north, and that the information we were forecasting on had a lot of areas that were data poor. So last night, what Weather Service did, because of the fact that this has such a potential to be a high impact storm, as they took some of the hurricane hunter planes, now not the ones you think of that fly into the storms and give us where the storm's located, what the winds are inside the storm, but a set of jets, which are Gulfstream G4s, that oftentimes in hurricanes, we deploy them to fly into the environment around hurricanes, and they drop instrument packages that allow us to feed more information into the computer models. They did that in the Pacific last night. When that information came in, what it has resulted in is a major northward shift in the storm, where it's going to be. What that is going to do is that is going to allow milder air to mix into the storm, especially off the ground. We're talking 5,000 to 10,000 feet up, and I can kind of show you that real complex looking graphic that we can show you coming up in a moment. That is now leading us more towards a storm that is going to have a significant amount of icing in over us here. So let me go in here. I'm going to pull up some of the computer models, and I'm going to jump back and forth to show you some of these things. And these are for Sunday morning. We're just going to look specifically at Sunday morning when things are really going to start getting messy for us. All right, so this is the European model. All right, one of the things in the European model that we have right here is that the center of the storm, if you remember when Matt and I were talking, we thought the center of the storm was going to be down here. I just wrote the letter L in yellow. In fact, let's change the color to that and make it red for you. All right, so it's this area here. This is where we were looking at the center of the storm being. Now the center of the storm is up here, okay, further to the north, and that is going to open the door for warmer air to come in over us, come in out of the east. So again, that is a loft, and that actually works its way up all the way, as you can see here, back off to the west, almost up into, for example, areas around Nelson County. Now, this is the European model. There are 4 different models to look at. Go ahead and clear those graphics off for you in that drawing. But one of the things that you see now is that we have moved into an area that is now pink over us, with further to the north, that dark blue being all heavy snow, big time snow, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Winchester, those areas. And this is extending all the way up towards New York City. The grandkids in New York City are going to be happy about that if this model is correct. But the concern is this huge area of pink over us, which would be freezing rain. And freezing rain is the enemy of power because it weights down tree branches, which come down and take out. Okay, take out power lines. It weights down the power lines in the power companies where you've got the above ground power lines. Places like Wood Lake, places like out in the newer developments out in the West End, places like Meredith Place up in Hanover County. They all have the power lines underground, but you got to remember the lines that feed into them a lot of times are still above ground. And power companies actually have to calculate out how far out to place power poles to allow for the sagging there. So this is the issue right here where we would see, and this is 96 hours, so we're starting again as we get closer and closer, we get into better and better data. Okay, but show you what happens here. And you can see this ice actually works its way up and it finally weakens as we get to, well, it says at the top right there, it says Sunday 18Z, that's 1 p.m. in the afternoon. This is universal coordinated time. And even get a little mix all the way up towards Baltimore, and then weakens in the afternoon hours. Now, if we change the model and we look at the American GFS model, which came way north last night, it's kind of settled back down a little bit. Okay, we'll go back here. We'll take you back again. That's Sunday as it's coming to an end. All right, this is Sunday morning here. It's still holding on to the snow over us, but you see the purple coming in. That is sleet, okay, which is basically ice pellets. All right, sleet is if you're not going to get snow, you want rain. You don't want freezing rain. Sleet's maybe the better, worst option to pick, because sleet is basically ice pellets coming down, but that means it doesn't accumulate on branches and power lines. And 1 inch of sleet roughly is the equivalent of about 4 inches of snow as far as the weight when you got to shovel it out of there. Sleet would be when it compacts down, would become much bigger problems on the roads. Okay, but that would continue as we said. We get in here, we would stay snow into the early morning hours on Sunday, and then go over to sleet, and then kind of weaken out before it picks back up again. And you see maybe a little area right there where the sleet picks up again as we go into the overnight hours. All right, so if we go back and look at quick peek at the Canadian model. All right, this is the one. The Canadian model's been the one that's been kind of the iciest over us here. All right, throughout the current, and that's got snow, and that's got again that sleet pattern back in over us, and you see it gets a real good sleet storm, and then it goes over to some freezing rain coming through, and then finally the German model, which is the icon model. All right, back this up to where we want to start, which is one we don't have as much experience with. All right, but this one here gives us, again, that's the icon model. That's got freezing. You get a little better holding on the cold air down against the mountains, better for snow, places like Wintergreen and Massanutten. But even still, that brings us up into ice storm conditions all the way up over us here. Okay, so the trend is more towards ice. All right, now, as far as historic references, you can go back to 1994. We had a storm that was sleet over us in the metro region, western Hanover, Louisa, terrible ice storm there. That storm got nicknamed the Giant Slurpee because it was literally 4 to 5 inches deep as far as sleet, okay, occurred. And it was like trying to drive in a Slurpee. And think about that. If you went to 7-Eleven, you just emptied all the Slurpee machines out of the highway, tried to drive through them. And then in 2003, we had another storm that was 4 to 5 inches of sleet over us here. And I remember that at my house that I lived in at that time, because the garage cast a shadow, kind of blocked the sun. Front of the driveway was easy to clean up. Back into the driveway was just having to take an ice pick and chop to get that out. So that's the sleet. The issue if we're going into, for example, something much more like the European model right here, okay, where we've got all this heavy freezing rain over us, all right through here, that's potential power line devastation. Yeah. Okay, we're talking Christmas Eve, 1998. That was that huge ice storm that we had. That was the one that took out, tremendous amounts of power. Williamsburg, parts of Williamsburg area, no power into New Year's. 2000, we had the ice storm that was on Super Bowl Sunday. Now, temperatures were marginally around freezing. Roads were actually okay in that storm. Power lines came down everywhere. We can go to a whole bunch of stories about what happened in that one. And then the other thing that happened was we had the ice storm just a couple of years ago that affected Southside. We'll show you some of the graphics we have from that. And that was the first time Richmond actually ever had an ice storm warning. Ice storm warnings really didn't exist before 2020. Want to show you one product from this that I can add in here that we're sharing to show you. And we'll just pick the parameters we want to show. And this is one where we can go in here and we can go into the winter weather parameter and we can show you potential ice accumulation, okay? So this is total ice. This would be sleet and freezing rain. This is starting as we get into, and I think I can just actually zoom in on that a little bit. So the numbers here, these are in 1/100ths of an inch, not metric, okay? But it shows you here 0.32 inches, 0.39 inches. And as we go through the day, we'll advance the time forward, okay? So that by the time we get to about 10 p.m. in the evening, that area that you see down here, okay, right here, that is the potential for an inch of ice. Okay, right here, this is over half an inch of ice. Okay, in this area here over us. Now, even if you cut these numbers in half, this would be a significant ice storm for Central Virginia. And kind of the general rule of thumb that you can use is that if you keep 1/4 of an inch of ice, say on the tree branches, below that, most of the tree branches can handle it pretty well. If you go quarter of an inch to half an inch, you start getting into problems. Over half an inch of ice, it's lights out, folks. You've got tree branches coming down, you've got power lines coming down everywhere. And that's going to be the major concern. And remember, on top of this, it is going to be bitterly cold over us here. Bitterly cold, all right?
That was a question I had for you, John, actually, is that there's no warming up for days after this. What does that mean when you hear that? And what can you tell people about that?
This is going to be like a bad wedding gift, okay? Where it's like no matter how hard you try to get rid of it, it doesn't go away.
Right.
Okay, and it's going to take a long time to get rid of. Longer than you would think. And again, the power outages are going to be the big question from this. Now, let me show you a couple of the graphics right here. I want to show you this. Okay, now the National Weather Service puts out storm threats, and this is from the Sterling, Virginia office. I just happen to have that one, and this is essentially the way this graphic works. And Wakefield does it. These graphics are actually set up for emergency managers. So the people have to, respond to all of this for the Wakefield office. All right. Essentially, what you're looking at is confidence, which is going up, potential impact, which is going to the right. So the least confidence, least impact is the bottom left-hand corner. The worst case scenario is the upper right-hand corner. And you notice everybody up in here is in the purple. Haven't seen the one for Wakefield yet. I can imagine we're looking at potentially somewhere in the reds right now. Last time the Sterling office issued one of these that was all purple for their area was 10 years ago this week.
Wow.
Which was the storm that was the snowstorm over us that gave 11.5 inches out at the airport, gave almost 20 inches out in the West End. Okay, they're talking about snow for us here. Again, our concern is going to be ice over us. Again, we can go back, and if I pop in over here, we can go back to our very first ice storm warning that ever happened here, which was February 12th and 13th, 5 years ago. First ice storm warning issued from Richmond, and of course the problem with that was we didn't really have ice storm warnings before there. That was the worst ice storm since January 2000. Now, Richmond was not that bad. This was one that devastated Southside Virginia, and that's an area that looks like it could really get clobbered once again over us here. We go in here, click here. All right, you can kind of see what happened. So this is how this one broke out. This was the analysis, the snowfall analysis, and notice there was snow north of us. 4 inches of snow, inch of snow in the Richmond area, okay? But the ice was down to the south. So the ice was all down. Concentrated, especially right through here. Okay, so we're talking Nottoway County, Dinwiddie, Lunenburg County, Mecklenburg County, Brunswick County, over here into Charlotte County. And those were the areas that had the power outages that were just tremendous as a result of this. So as you can see, this is the power outage chart. And with real-time Viper, we now have this data that comes in, and we can get that to show you in real time what the estimated power outages are. And you look at all these counties here. Okay, these were all the counties that essentially power was basically almost completely out. Okay, in those areas. Up here we had the snow, no problems. You get a couple problems here, a little bit Powhatan, Goochland, Cumberland, Powhatan. But this area, Amelia, Nottoway, okay, rural locations, above ground power lines. Ice and that does not mix very well. So that's the issue we are looking at right now. Again, watch the models. The next couple of runs coming in, the model run for tomorrow is really going to be key over us, but the transition has been towards more of an ice storm for central and southern Virginia, more of a big snowstorm going north, Washington, D.C., Fredericksburg, Baltimore. Snowfall accumulations, they're looking big time up in those areas.
Well, this is the concern for me, like you're saying, is the power outages. And
right.
What sort of tips do you have for people who may not have power for days? What are the tricks to keeping your food safe, keeping your body temperature up?
Keeping your body temperature up, you're going to have to be warm. Try to at least get one room that you can warm up. And obviously people who've got fireplaces can use that. Kerosene heaters, you have got to be exceptionally careful with those. If you got a gas grill, you can cook food on the gas. You get the gas grill, but you cook it outside, not in your garage. You can either on the porch or on the deck. You never bring one of those in the house. And the other thing is, remember, your food will stay in the freezer cold for at least a day or so, as long as you keep the doors closed. Other thing to worry about, and I will bring this up, if we get massive power outages in Richmond, could we have problems with the water once again?
Yeah, that's been on everybody's mind.
I think that could be a looming question. So, I mean, I don't know the answers to that. That's something for Mayor Danny to talk about. So,
yes, hopefully no problems there.
Yep.
I did have one more question for you. Oh, we're streaming this live on Facebook too. Someone on Facebook is asking, if I have to drive at all this weekend, is that a good idea? My answer would be no. What's your answer?
Nah, no, not at all. I've got a friend who has to go down into the state of Georgia to help someone move. They were going to do it on Saturday. They advanced it and moved it to Friday, coming up and doing that. So,
yeah. And John, I don't know if you've looked into this at all. We talked a few times when you were still here about my sister lives in Asheville, North Carolina. And she was kind of having some fears about this because of what happened with the hurricane a few years ago. What are the...
There's not... Okay, for your sister who's doing her residency.
Yes.
You're not going to have the physical amount of moisture that you had with Helene.
Okay.
Okay. So there's not going to be that physical amount of moisture coming in, because they had what we call an antecedent event, something that happened before that primed the area for when a real soaking rain came through, was going to cause issues. Other thing to remember, a whole lot of the country's in a drought right now, so we actually really need a good amount of water.
Okay. All right. Well, we got a couple other things coming into the podcast studio, so I'm going to let you go, John. Thank you so much for doing this with us. It was so great to see you.
Okay, good to see you too.
All right. See you next time.
Yep.